Hey now, happy Wednesday. Good morning, PASW staff, clients, and friends joining us. Let's get right to serious work. Hope you thought about Miles Davis. Hope you enjoyed the review yesterday just about his life, about his sound. It was cool jazz, right? Mild jazz. We looked at a little bit of modal jazz. We'll take a little bit more just based on modes, on musical modes. But before we get into that, we like Miles because he had his own style. We like people that have their own style. We try to create our own style. That's what we kind of do as independent, free thinkers. And so just because we've done so many classes, if we think of the 1959 album, Kind of Blue, and when I think of Miles Davis and jazz, how do we get there again? I mean, you know, because I think about that way too. If we're talking about jazz music, when did this kind of sound? What was the evolution of this? Now, classical music, Scott Joplin, Dixieland, Louis Armstrong, swing music, right? I'm going through the decades here. Swing music, how do you get from swing music to bebop music to cool jazz? How do we do that? Right around the 30s, people like Lester Young, who we did a class on, the saxophonist, people like Lester Young, they started taking solos in swing bands, and you would take a solo with Glenn Miller or something like that, Duke Ellington, and the solo would be maybe 16 bars, maybe 24 bars, maybe 30 seconds or a minute. Eventually the solos became a little longer, and this is when you improvise something, right? So you have a big band, the guy stands up, takes a solo, sits back down. Somehow in the 30s, at some point, artists started taking longer solos, and the bands became smaller. We talked about Louis Jordan a few weeks ago, where it wasn't a big band, it was a small band, because it was cheaper, more economical, and you could solo longer because not everybody in the whole band had to take a solo. So by the 30s, we're getting more soloists, people like Lester Young, people like Louis Jordan, with jump blues, right? We talked about that genre, where they had small combos, that it wasn't a big swing orchestra, it wasn't quite bebop, it was going into bebop, but they didn't know that yet, don't tell them. And so from jump blues and boogie woogie, it's gonna either go into two things. It's gonna either go into bebop, or it's going to go into R&B, right? Louis Jordan, Chuck Berry. So it's going to go in, and with R&B, it's going to go to rock and roll. With bebop, it's going to go into cool jazz. So it's kind of like we're just simplifying. Of course, there's other genres going on, but for music, we're just simplifying. So it's more soloing and improvising. So that's how we got to Miles Davis. People like Lester Young, Lionel Hampton are going to be doing that. People like Louis Jordan, Louis Prima, they're going to be going more into rhythm and blues, with a swing background. So Miles has his own style. When you hear it, you know that usually many times there's a Harman mute we talked about yesterday. That dampens the sound, that mutes the sound. Also creates just a style. I mean, when you hear a ballad with Miles playing the mute, you know that that's Miles Davis because nobody else was playing the trumpet like that. Probably Birth of the Cool was the first album that Miles said, let's slow all this music down. Because like I said, with Charlie Parker, that was bebop, that was fast. But other people like Dizzy Gillespie, they could play that. And Miles is not going to play that game so much. He likes that game, he came from that game, but he's creating a new game. And that new game is cool jazz. It's a milder approach. And like I said yesterday, it doesn't mean that it's easier. Just because it's slower doesn't mean it's easier at all. And and there's some fast songs that are cool jazz for sure. It's not necessarily just tempo. I don't know when, but if we think of, it's a minimalist approach, right? I mean, we talked about Philip Glass with minimalism. There's a stripping down component that happens in the 50s and 60s where there's all this big, huge sound, music, people, band, and then people start stripping down. People like Miles Davis say, well, I'll just play this ballad with a few other guys. People like Philip Glass say, well, I'll just play line with just another line going on, and we'll keep it, there's a stripping down, we'll keep it minimal. So not that Miles Davis and Philip Glass sound at all alike, not at all, but there's something that's happening culturally, musically, by the 50s, 60s where it's stripping down. So Kind of Blue comes out in 1959, very simple melodic element, and I'm choosing this because it's the most commercial of Miles Davis. It's up there in some of the best albums ever used. We've talked about it. It's got elements of classical music, which we're going to take a listen to with Bill Evans. There's African ballet music that Miles was very influenced by. There's blues in it. It has all these elements, but it's not just, it's all sounds cohesive. It all sounds not planned out because he came in with sketches, as we know. He didn't come in with full charts. Nobody had really heard the ideas that he was working on with Gil Evans. These were original sketches that he was composing, and they were, I don't know if he knew he was going to change the world, but nobody knows when they go into the studio. So when they go into the studio, the first song that we're going to take a look at is So What? Supposedly, So What came from Dennis Hopper asking Miles Davis, so what? So what? He kept saying, well, so what? And trying to get deeper into Miles's thing. I don't know if that's true, but that's because it's a funny title. We'll just pay attention to this song because it's. I mean, you guys know this, right? It's very catchy. It's easy. There's just 2 chords in the whole song. It's cool, for lack of a better word. That's why they call it cool jazz. But there's something really fresh still about it. This doesn't sound dated. This doesn't sound too complex. It doesn't sound like they're just, this is kind of, it's not my type of music. Mostly if you put on So What at a party, which I know you guys do, or something, or in a movie, it'll set the tone where people are like, yeah, I like this song. I don't know why I like it, but I like it. So why do we like it? It's very catchy and simple. Let's just take a listen to just the opening. This is Bill Evans. We did a class on Bill Evans. Listen to this piano playing. So, earlier when I was like, Bill Evans was influenced by classical music, some of these statements that I hear people say, I always want to pause them and say, well, but how? Not like I want to call them on it. I just want to say, let's slow it down. So Bill Evans, and it's true. When I said that he was influenced by Debussy, let's listen to this Debussy piece and tell me it doesn't sound a lot like what we just heard for the opening of Miles Davis's song. That's in 1910. I can't do the math, but 1910 to 1959, that was a long time later. But doesn't Debussy, so you hear Bill Evans using Debussy in a way that's not going to be like, hey, why are you playing classical music? But this is a jazz album. He's saying, well, no, we'll use these, and Miles and Bill Evans work closely with the sounds of this. We'll use these kind of impressionist sounds, these sounds from Debussy, but we'll incorporate it into our jazz music. I just thought the intro to that, and Debussy was very, very close to it, but he's not playing a classical piece. He's using classical for the opening of the jazz, so what? And also the bass, if you can hear the bass, such a famous riff. The bass is playing the main theme. That's very unusual too, and they're kind of answering the bass. Bass usually never gets a solo, it's just in the background. If you drop out the bass, you notice it, but if the bass is there, you just know everything's cool. So the bass is important, and if we think of a new sound, what is that new sound? It's chordal harmony. We talked a little bit about chordal harmony. As opposed to thirds, stacked thirds sounds very pleasant and nice. Stacked fourths, that's chordal harmony. With who? We talked to Oliver Nelson did that. People like Dolphy, Nelson, they took chordal harmony to a whole new level, expanding in the 60s. Miles is doing chordal harmony, modal harmony, and what does that mean in fourths? Well, let's just look at the opening bar of So What. Look at the chordal stacks going on. So D to G at the bottom, that's a fourth, right? That's chordal. Chordal is a fourth. That's all that it means. And then it's resolving to C and an F, that's chordal. But there's thirds on the top. In the first, there's G and B, right? Thirds. So he's got thirds, but there's chordal, and that's why it sounds pleasant and consonant, but there's something a little bit that sounds, wait, what is that? It's not just thirds and thirds, it's thirds with a fourth. Thirds with a fourth, it's kind of call and answer. That's all well and good. But look at the left hand. That's just all chordal harmony. The E to A, fourth, right? D to G, a fourth. If you play these separately, it doesn't sound like anything. I mean, just listen to the right hand playing. That sounds fine. And then it resolves to this, right? But then together, it sounds like this. Okay, listen to the right hand play. First one, second one, and then together, that sounds good too. Now listen to all left and right hand playing together. And now just repeat that. You got So What? You've got the groove going here. So this is how Miles gets a new sound. This is chordal harmony. This is different kind of harmonic jazz that sounds different, but it's still melodic and still catchy. Just sounds a little different. So when people say, well, Miles had that kind of, this tone sounded different than other people, this is just one example, one bar of how it sounds different. It even sounds different today, but it sounded fresh, probably super fresh in 1959. Just like Sgt. Pepper sounded different. I mean, we could do classes on just one bar that makes it sound different. We're just kind of analyzing in smaller, how these things happen just by taking one bar. Isn't that cool? I mean, we could just look at one bar for every band that's ever happened, or every composer, and just to see how they got that. So I hope you enjoyed Advanced Miles Davis. That was a lot of fun to talk to you about. Tomorrow we're going to be zipping around on some freeways in LA, so a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed this. Looking forward to finishing this week with you guys. Okay, take care. Bye.